Welcome to Historical Legacies. Here, we dive into history's most intriguing stories, unraveling mysteries and uncovering truths from the past. Subscribe to join our journey through time's greatest moments. Part 1. The Rise of the Julio-Claudian Dynasty. The story of Nero begins long before his birth, in a Rome caught between the grandeur of the Republic and the transformative power of the new imperial system. The seeds of his legacy were planted in the establishment of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. When Julius Caesar was assassinated, the Roman world found itself in a vacuum of power where old traditions clashed with rising ambitions. Rome's first emperor, Augustus, capitalized on this chaos to shape the empire. He represented a new era, establishing stability, wealth, and the foundation of Roman imperial rule that would last for centuries. Augustus carefully crafted a vision of Rome that merged his authority with the Republican past, even though his power was absolute. He had hoped to build a line of succession, but his family would inherit not only his empire but also the internal rivalries and complexities that came with it. The line of rulers that followed him became known as the Julio-Claudians. This dynasty was characterized by both greatness and darkness, brilliance and madness. After Augustus came Tiberius, his adopted son, a skilled military commander who struggled to win the hearts of the Roman people. Tiberius's rule, though stable, became increasingly unpopular and isolated. His retreat to the island of Capri led to a growing corruption within Rome's governance. His successor, Caligula, quickly became infamous for his extreme and erratic behavior, pushing the boundaries of Roman decency and losing favor with Rome's elites. Caligula's assassination brought Claudius to the throne. A surprising choice for emperor, Claudius was often seen as weak or inept due to his physical disabilities. Yet he proved to be shrewd, expanding the empire and initiating many public works. Despite his strengths, Claudius was vulnerable to manipulation. His marriages became entangled with political schemes, leading him to adopt Nero, the young boy who would become the fourth emperor. This adoption was orchestrated by Agrippina the Younger, Nero's ambitious and cunning mother. Agrippina was a power player in her own right, belonging to the Julio-Claudian family line and determined to see her son rise. In her mind, Nero's destiny was intertwined with Rome's, and she was prepared to eliminate anyone who stood in their way. Claudius's suspicious death in 54 CE left the path clear for Nero. Rome now had an emperor barely 16 years old, a boy in a man's world, shaped by his mother's ambition and the bloody legacy of his forebears. The Julio-Claudian dynasty had laid a complex and often contradictory foundation for Roman rule. While Augustus and Claudius had made efforts to balance power and promote stability, figures like Caligula had introduced elements of chaos and excess. As Nero took the throne, he inherited both the structure of the empire and the tensions simmering within it. Rome stood at a crossroads. The young Nero had the potential to follow in the footsteps of Augustus, to bring prosperity and greatness to the empire. Yet, as his early life had shown, he was already surrounded by the very forces that could push him toward darkness. The stage was set for a reign that would become infamous in the annals of Roman history. Part 2. Young Nero and his complex family. Nero's story is one of ambition, manipulation, and a young life shaped by forces beyond his control. Born Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus in 37 CE, he was the only son of Agrippina the Younger, a powerful and determined woman from the Julio-Claudian lineage. His father, Gnaeus Domitius Ahenobarbus, was known for his arrogance and ruthlessness, characteristics that many would later say Nero inherited. Nero's father passed away when he was young, leaving him solely in the care of Agrippina, who was a fierce protector and strategist. His mother's ambitions quickly became his reality, as she moved to secure him a place within the elite circles of Rome, cultivating allies and laying the groundwork for his future rise. Agrippina was the daughter of Germanicus, a celebrated general, and niece to Emperor Tiberius, giving her significant influence and credibility within Rome. Despite her high status, her life was marked by upheaval and tragedy. Her brother, the infamous Caligula, became emperor when Nero was just a toddler. Caligula's reign was known for its cruelty and instability, casting a shadow over the family's name. In one instance, Caligula exiled Agrippina on suspicion of conspiracy, and she was forced to live far from Rome, separated from young Nero. This experience of separation and political uncertainty left a mark on both mother and son, deepening Agrippina's resolve to regain power. When Caligula was assassinated, Claudius ascended to the throne, restoring Agrippina's status in Rome. She returned with renewed ambition, determined to place Nero in a position of influence. Claudius, however, was already married to another powerful woman, Messalina. Nero's position remained tenuous, overshadowed by Messalina and her children, particularly her son Britannicus, who was a legitimate heir to the throne. But in a dramatic twist, Messalina was accused of plotting against Claudius and was executed, clearing the way for Agrippina. With Messalina out of the picture, Agrippina set her sights on Claudius, using her charm and influence to secure a marriage. Once married to the emperor, Agrippina worked tirelessly to elevate Nero's status. She convinced Claudius to adopt Nero, making him Britannicus's official stepbrother and legal heir. Nero, at this young age, was thrust into an environment of intense rivalry and manipulation. Agrippina kept a close watch over her son, guiding him through the complex web of courtly life and teaching him to navigate the dangerous world of Roman politics. Under her direction, Nero was educated by some of the best tutors Rome had to offer, including the Stoic philosopher Seneca. Seneca's teachings would later influence Nero's early reign, though much of this influence would dissipate over time. As he grew, Nero became a favorite of the Roman elite, who saw in him a potential ruler with poise and charisma. Agrippina ensured he was visible at public events, carefully crafting an image of him as a promising young leader. This public persona was not entirely of his making. It was a carefully constructed image that masked the complexities of his character. Nero was not only Agrippina's son but her project, a figure molded to fulfill her aspirations and secure her legacy within the empire. In 54 CE, Claudius died under suspicious circumstances, with many historians later speculating that Agrippina orchestrated his death to expedite Nero's rise. Poison was allegedly used, a tool of subtlety and discretion that Agrippina would have known well. With Claudius gone, Nero became emperor, though he was still very young and inexperienced. At just 16, he was thrust into a position of immense power, yet his mother remained a dominant influence, effectively controlling the empire from behind the scenes. Nero's early life had been a complex and turbulent journey, filled with both privilege and manipulation. He was an emperor, but one under the watchful eye of a mother whose ambitions would soon clash with his own. This marked the beginning of a volatile relationship, as Nero struggled to emerge from Agrippina's shadow and assert his independence. Part 3. Agrippina's Influence and Nero's Ascension. When Nero ascended to the throne in 54 CE, the empire appeared to have a new, young ruler. But in reality, Rome was under the firm control of Agrippina the Younger. From the moment Claudius died, likely due to poisoning, with Agrippina as the suspected mastermind, she positioned herself as the true power behind Nero. Agrippina's ambitions had shaped Nero's life, but now her influence over him and the empire became even more visible and pervasive. This was a unique situation in Roman history. Never before had a woman wielded such power openly, and Agrippina made no effort to hide her control over her son. Agrippina's authority extended across nearly every facet of Nero's rule. She was present at Senate meetings, unheard of for a Roman woman, and often dictated policy decisions directly. Coins were minted with her likeness alongside Nero's, a bold statement in a society that placed men above women in matters of politics and governance. She took on the title of Augusta, a title previously given to only the most revered women in imperial Rome. Agrippina's presence was a constant reminder that Nero's power, in many ways, was contingent on her influence. However, her overreach would soon ignite a power struggle between mother and son. During Nero's early reign, Agrippina's strategic alliances helped stabilize the empire and reinforce his position. She surrounded Nero with advisors she trusted, including Seneca and the Praetorian prefect Burrus, both of whom served as moderating influences. They helped ensure a balanced approach to governance, focusing on legal reforms, fair trials, and public welfare. Under their guidance, Nero's early years as emperor appeared promising. Yet Agrippina's insistence on maintaining a tight grip on her son's actions began to create tension. Nero, growing in confidence, started to chafe under his mother's authority. He sought ways to assert his independence and break free from her control. One of the first signs of Nero's defiance appeared in his personal life. Agrippina had arranged his marriage to Octavia, daughter of Claudius and Messalina, to secure his connection to the Julio-Claudian line. But Nero's interests began to drift elsewhere. He became enamored with a freedwoman named Act, a relationship Agrippina vehemently opposed. To her, Act was a threat to the carefully constructed image of Nero as a respectable and virtuous ruler. This affair marked the beginning of Nero's rebellion against his mother's control. He defied Agrippina's wishes, refusing to end the relationship, which caused a serious rift between them. Tensions escalated further as Nero began to remove Agrippina's allies from his inner circle. He relied more on Seneca and Burrus, both of whom subtly encouraged Nero's independence from his mother. Agrippina's influence began to wane, and she found herself increasingly isolated. Nero's personal ambitions and interests clashed with the disciplined, strategic vision Agrippina had for his reign. Publicly, he continued to show respect, but privately, their relationship grew strained, with Nero resenting her intrusion into every aspect of his life. By 59 CE, the rift had widened to the point where Nero felt that Agrippina posed a serious threat to his rule. She was no longer the supportive mother and advisor. To him, she had become an obstacle. She still commanded significant loyalty among certain factions in Rome, and rumors circulated that she might attempt to replace him with Britannicus, Claudius's biological son and Nero's stepbrother. Whether or not Agrippina harbored such intentions, Nero's paranoia grew, and he believed she would not hesitate to take drastic action if he continued to undermine her authority. In a shocking move, Nero resolved to eliminate his mother. He attempted a plot involving a collapsible boat designed to sink and drown her, but Agrippina survived the attempt, swimming to shore. Undeterred, Nero ordered her assassination, claiming that she was plotting against him. Agrippina's murder marked a chilling shift in Nero's rule, symbolizing his complete break from the moral constraints that had previously held him. The calculated killing of his mother shocked Rome, signaling the arrival of a ruler who was willing to forsake any bond, no matter how sacred, in his pursuit of power. With Agrippina gone, Nero was finally free from her influence, but he had crossed a line that he could never return from. Her death severed Nero's last link to his family's legacy and set him on a path of unchecked authority and descent into tyranny. Part 4. The Early Reign, Promise and Popularity. In the aftermath of Agrippina's death, Nero's reign entered a phase that, for a brief time, offered Rome a glimpse of stability and prosperity. Now free from his mother's domineering influence, Nero relied on two trusted advisors, Seneca and Burrus, who worked to steer him toward a balanced and effective governance. Their influence, coupled with Nero's youthful energy, led to a series of reforms that initially won him popularity among the people. Nero's early years as emperor are often viewed as a time of potential, a period when Rome dared to hope for a capable and benevolent ruler. Seneca, a Stoic philosopher, brought an air of wisdom and prudence to Nero's court. He sought to instill in Nero values of justice, restraint, and duty, encouraging him to avoid the excesses that had plagued previous emperors. Burrus, as head of the Praetorian Guard, focused on maintaining order within the capital and ensured the loyalty of the military. Together, Seneca and Burrus created a buffer that allowed Nero to enjoy his position without succumbing to the darker temptations of absolute power. They guided Nero to initiate legal reforms that promoted fairness in the judicial system, with a focus on protecting the lower classes from abuses by the elite. One of Nero's notable early accomplishments was his commitment to public entertainment and the arts. Nero recognized that the people of Rome valued spectacles and celebrations, and he made a point of hosting lavish games and festivals. The emperor's affinity for the arts began to shine through as he supported musical performances, poetry readings, and theater. These events not only entertained the masses, but also created an atmosphere of cultural growth in Rome. Unlike many of his predecessors, who viewed the arts as secondary to military and political achievements, Nero took genuine interest in them. This aspect of his reign helped to foster an image of Nero as a cultured and relatable ruler who valued Rome's artistic heritage. Nero also paid attention to infrastructure and the welfare of the people. He implemented measures to ensure a steady grain supply, which kept food prices affordable for the common citizens. His focus on public works led to improvements in Rome's roads, aqueducts, and public buildings, enhancing the city's appearance and accessibility. At this time, the Roman Empire was thriving economically, with vast resources flowing in from its provinces. Nero's initial popularity was partly due to his ability to leverage this prosperity for the benefit of the people. As long as the citizens' needs were met, they were willing to overlook the occasional extravagances and indulgences of their young emperor. Despite these promising signs, Nero's love for public approval began to influence his decisions in ways that would later become concerning. His interest in performing arts was viewed by the traditional elite with a growing sense of unease. While the people may have enjoyed Nero's artistic displays, the Senate saw his public performances as unbecoming of an emperor. Rome's leaders valued dignity and restraint in their rulers, and Nero's willingness to appear on stage signaled to them a departure from those ideals. This tension between Nero's popularity among the masses and the skepticism of the aristocracy would gradually drive a wedge between him and Rome's governing class. As Nero grew older, the balance of influence between him, Seneca, and Burrus began to shift. Seneca's advice increasingly fell on deaf ears as Nero became more confident in his own vision of leadership. Burrus remained a stabilizing force, but his control over the Praetorian Guard could only safeguard Nero's rule to an extent. This period of stability and promise was not destined to last. Behind the scenes, Nero's thirst for adoration and self-expression was starting to overshadow his responsibilities as emperor. His love for public performances and the thrill of the crowd hinted at an inner desire that would soon lead him down a darker path. For a time, Nero's early reign had shown promise, and Rome experienced a period of peace and growth. Yet, the seeds of his eventual tyranny were already present. Nero's desire for admiration and artistic freedom, coupled with a weakening sense of restraint, would soon open the doors to excess and moral decay that would consume his rule. Part 5. The descent begins: ambition, luxury, and excess. As Nero's reign progressed, his initial promise and popularity began to erode. Freed from the influence of his mother, and feeling increasingly independent from his advisors Seneca and Burrus, Nero's ambitions took a darker turn. His fascination with the arts and desire for constant public adoration grew into a consuming obsession. The young emperor, still only in his 20s, began indulging in excesses that alienated the Senate, strained his finances, and shocked Rome's conservative elite. Nero's lavish lifestyle extended to all corners of his life. He hosted opulent banquets that lasted for days, serving rare and exotic foods sourced from across the empire. Guests at his parties enjoyed luxuries that only the wealthiest Romans could dream of, and the emperor surrounded himself with an entourage of entertainers, musicians, and poets. These festivities, while spectacular, required enormous funding, leading Nero to drain the imperial treasury to sustain his lifestyle. The excessive spending also sparked resentment among Rome's elites, who saw Nero's behavior as reckless and unbecoming of an emperor. As Nero immersed himself in his artistic pursuits, he sought to solidify his status as a performer. He performed on stage, sang, and even played instruments before the Roman public, much to the horror of the aristocracy. To the Roman elite, the idea of an emperor participating in public performances was scandalous. It undermined the dignity and gravitas expected of a ruler. But Nero was captivated by the adoration he received from the crowd, craving their applause and admiration more than the respect of his peers. In his mind, being an artist was as noble as being an emperor, if not more so. This need for approval and artistic expression gradually began to define his rule, overshadowing the responsibilities of governance. In his pursuit of pleasure and spectacle, Nero neglected essential duties and alienated key advisors. Seneca and Burrus, who had once tempered Nero's impulses, found themselves increasingly sidelined. The two advisors grew disillusioned as Nero disregarded their guidance, opting instead to follow the whims of his passions. Seneca, disheartened by the emperor's behavior, withdrew from public life as he saw Nero slipping further into excess. Burrus, meanwhile, struggled to maintain the loyalty of the Praetorian Guard, as their trust in Nero's leadership began to waver. Without the steadying presence of these advisors, Nero was left to his own devices, leading him to indulge his desires with little restraint. During this period, Nero became infatuated with Poppaea Sabina, a beautiful and ambitious woman who encouraged his indulgences. Poppaea, aware of Nero's growing dissatisfaction with his marriage to Octavia, became a central figure in his life, fueling his impulses and pushing him further away from traditional responsibilities. Under her influence, Nero began to justify his actions as the privileges of imperial power, seeing himself above the laws and morals that governed ordinary Romans. His affair with Poppaea caused a public scandal, as his neglect of Octavia, a beloved figure among the people, was widely seen as a betrayal of Rome's values. This affair and his subsequent divorce from Octavia alienated the public, diminishing the popularity he had once enjoyed. Nero's descent into luxury and self-indulgence began to take a toll on the empire itself. His extravagant spending left the treasury strained, and he resorted to heavy taxation to replenish the funds he continuously depleted. This financial burden fell heavily on the provinces and on Rome's citizens, who grew increasingly resentful of Nero's excesses. Public works projects slowed as funds were diverted to Nero's lavish lifestyle, and the people began to feel the effects of his neglect. Even the Roman military, traditionally loyal to the emperor, began to feel disillusioned, as soldiers received fewer resources and rewards. What had started as a promising reign now showed signs of decay. Nero's pursuit of pleasure, artistic recognition, and luxury overshadowed his responsibilities as emperor. His actions had sparked resentment across Roman society, from the elite Senate to the common citizens, and the stability of his rule was beginning to fracture. The stage was set for a reign that would become increasingly unpredictable and dangerous, as Nero's desires and ambitions spiraled beyond control. Part 6. The Conspiracies and the Fall of the Elite. As Nero's reign continued to spiral into chaos, conspiracies began to swirl around him, driven by discontent and fear among the elite of Rome. The Senate, feeling increasingly marginalized and disillusioned by Nero's lavish lifestyle and erratic behavior, started to organize against him. Political rivalries and personal ambitions collided, leading to a growing network of conspirators who sought to unseat the emperor. The growing unrest reflected a broader dissatisfaction with Nero's rule, which was now seen as a perilous blend of tyranny and indulgence. Among the many plots, one of the most notorious was led by the senator Gaius Calpurnius Piso, who sought to rally support against Nero by promising a return to a more traditional and respected form of governance. Piso's conspiracy gained traction among several prominent senators who had grown weary of Nero's behavior and feared for their own political futures. The conspirators met in secret, plotting the assassination of the emperor as a way to restore stability to Rome and re-establish senatorial authority. The desire for a return to the dignity of the Senate highlighted the widening chasm between Nero and the aristocracy, a divide that would prove to be fatal. The conspiracy was revealed in 65 CE, leading to a violent crackdown by Nero. He reacted swiftly, ordering the arrest of suspected conspirators and launching a campaign of terror against his perceived enemies. Many senators were executed or forced to commit suicide, a grim reminder of Nero's willingness to eliminate opposition without hesitation. Among those killed were some of Rome's most esteemed citizens, including the philosopher Seneca, who chose suicide over execution, his death marking a profound loss for Roman intellectual life. In his paranoia, Nero increasingly turned to brutal methods to maintain control over the city and quell dissent. His reign became characterized by bloodshed and terror, as he targeted anyone he perceived as a threat to his power, often using the pretense of conspiracies to justify his actions. The Praetorian Guard, once loyal to him, found themselves disillusioned and increasingly brutalized by the emperor's demands for loyalty, leading to a toxic atmosphere of fear and suspicion within the ranks of Rome's elite. As political tensions rose, Nero's relationship with the military began to falter. The very forces that had supported him during his rise to power started to see through his facade of control and grandeur. Dissatisfaction among the troops grew, and rumors of revolts began to circulate, sowing seeds of uncertainty about Nero's ability to maintain order in the empire. This was particularly dangerous for Nero, as the loyalty of the military was critical to the stability of any emperor's reign. Nero's reign reached a tipping point during the year 68 CE when revolts began to break out across the provinces, led by disenchanted military commanders and governors who had lost faith in the emperor's leadership. Galba, a respected general, emerged as a key figure in these uprisings, gathering support among the legions and positioning himself as a viable alternative to Nero. As unrest spread through the provinces, it became clear that Nero's grip on power was slipping, and the empire he ruled was on the brink of collapse. In the face of mounting pressure, Nero's behavior grew, increasingly erratic and desperate. He became obsessed with the idea of personal legacy, seeing himself as an artist and performer above all else, while neglecting the state of the empire and the needs of its people. His public performances became increasingly grandiose, as he sought to distract from the turmoil surrounding him and reinforce his image as a divine figure. Yet, these efforts only served to alienate him further from the Senate and the military, who viewed his self-indulgence as a sign of weakness. As the situation in Rome deteriorated, Nero's isolation grew, and he found himself without the allies and support he had once enjoyed. The walls of his palace, once a symbol of imperial power, began to close in on him as his advisors deserted him and former allies turned against him. He was losing not only political support but also the goodwill of the people, who could no longer overlook the violence and chaos that had come to define his rule. The conspiracies against him, the revolts in the provinces, and the eroding trust of the Senate signaled that Nero's reign was nearing its end. As his power crumbled around him, the emperor found himself increasingly alone, trapped in a web of his own making, where ambition had become his greatest enemy. The fall of the elite and the rise of rebellion set the stage for a climactic turning point in Nero's reign, a moment when the consequences of his excesses would come crashing down. Part 7. The Great Fire of Rome, a turning point. In July of 64 CE, a catastrophic event struck the city of Rome that would define Nero's reign and alter the course of history: the Great Fire of Rome. For 6 days and 7 nights, the blaze consumed vast swathes of the city, destroying homes, temples, and public buildings, leaving thousands homeless and destitute. While the cause of the fire remains a subject of debate, the aftermath would profoundly impact Nero's image and reign. Many Romans speculated that Nero himself had ordered the fire to clear space for his ambitious architectural projects, particularly his grand vision for the Domus Aurea, a luxurious palace complex. In the wake of the disaster, Nero's response was seen as a mix of calculated maneuvering and public relations disaster. Initially, he sought to distance himself from the blame, claiming that the fire was a natural disaster and that he was doing everything possible to aid the victims. However, his actions were perceived as inadequate and self-serving, especially given the vast resources at his disposal as emperor. Many citizens felt that Nero was more interested in restoring his own reputation than genuinely helping those affected by the catastrophe. The perception that he was detached and indifferent deepened the rift between him and the people. To bolster his image, Nero opened the gardens of his palace to provide shelter for the homeless and organized food distributions to alleviate the suffering caused by the fire. Despite these efforts, rumors persisted that he had either started the fire himself or had taken advantage of it to advance his own ambitions. Such rumors played into the hands of his political enemies, who seized upon the opportunity to paint him as a tyrant unconcerned with the welfare of his subjects. This public perception contributed to the growing discontent and unrest within the empire, igniting further conspiracies against him. Amidst the chaos, Nero sought to divert attention away from the fire and its aftermath by focusing on his artistic pursuits. He organized a series of grand performances to showcase his talents, inviting citizens to attend his public shows, including poetry recitals, singing contests, and dramatic plays. To many Romans, this behavior seemed grotesque and insensitive in light of the suffering caused by the fire. His need for approval and admiration only highlighted his detachment from reality, as he continued to engage in self-indulgent displays at a time when the city was in ruins. In the aftermath of the fire, Nero also began to implement significant urban planning changes, using the disaster as a justification for sweeping reforms. He proposed new building regulations and fire codes, leading to the creation of wider streets and more robust structures. However, the timing of these reforms did little to endear him to the citizens, who still mourned their lost homes and livelihoods. Instead, the populace remained suspicious of his motives, believing he was using the fire as a cover for an opportunistic power grab, aiming to reshape the city according to his vision. As Rome began to rebuild, the societal fractures deepened. The aftermath of the fire and the public's negative perception of Nero fueled growing resentment among the elite, who began to view him as an increasingly unstable ruler. The senators, who had long been critical of his extravagant lifestyle and erratic behavior, now saw the Great Fire as a pivotal moment that exposed Nero's inability to lead effectively in times of crisis. His artistic pursuits, once a source of fascination, began to look more like symptoms of a megalomaniac than the endeavors of a benevolent emperor. Simultaneously, as a scapegoat for the disaster, Nero targeted a specific group, the Christians. He accused them of starting the fire, using this as a pretext to launch a brutal persecution against them. The resulting violence marked one of the first major persecutions of Christians in Roman history and would set a precedent for future crackdowns on the sect. Nero's actions not only intensified the hostility toward him, but also contributed to the growing identity of Christians as a distinct and persecuted group within the empire. The Great Fire, with its devastating consequences and the subsequent fallout, represented a significant turning point in Nero's reign. What began as a devastating tragedy soon morphed into an opportunity for scapegoating and increased tyranny, setting in motion a series of events that would contribute to his downfall. The fire and its aftermath ignited public anger, catalyzing unrest, and signaling that the winds of change were beginning to blow against the emperor. As whispers of rebellion grew louder, the consequences of Nero's choices began to manifest more overtly, and the stage was set for an even more dramatic confrontation between the emperor and those who sought to unseat him. The Great Fire of Rome had not only altered the landscape of the city, but had also ignited a firestorm of discontent that would threaten Nero's reign. Part 8. The Persecution of Christians, Scapegoats, and Political Maneuvering. In the wake of the Great Fire of Rome, the atmosphere within the empire grew increasingly charged with tension and paranoia. Seeking to deflect blame from himself, Nero targeted the Christian community, labeling them as scapegoats for the catastrophe that had devastated the city. This decision marked a significant turning point in the relationship between the Roman state and the nascent Christian movement. The persecution that followed would go down in history as one of the first organized attacks on Christians, setting a grim precedent for their treatment in the Roman Empire. Nero's allegations against the Christians were fueled by a combination of fear and misunderstanding about their beliefs and practices. The general populace was unfamiliar with the tenets of Christianity, often viewing it as a strange and dangerous cult. As tensions rose, Nero exploited these fears to rally public support, positioning himself as a protector of traditional Roman values while demonizing the Christians as enemies of the state. This tactic not only served to distract from his failings, but also played into the broader narrative of maintaining order and security within the empire. The persecution was brutal and unforgiving. Nero's regime employed a variety of torturous methods to punish those accused of being Christians, including execution, imprisonment, and public humiliation. Many were subjected to horrific deaths, such as being burned alive as human torches to illuminate Nero's nighttime celebrations, or being fed to wild animals in the arena for the entertainment of the public. These gruesome spectacles served both to instill fear in the population and to reinforce Nero's perceived strength in dealing with dissent. Despite the sheer brutality of the persecution, the treatment of Christians paradoxically highlighted their resilience and ability to unify in the face of adversity. Their suffering fostered a strong sense of community among Christians, encouraging them to support one another and solidify their faith. Additionally, the persecutions drew attention to their plight, gaining sympathy from certain segments of the population who were horrified by the cruelty inflicted upon them. Over time, this would contribute to the growing visibility and strength of the Christian community, ultimately undermining Nero's efforts to eradicate them. As the persecution intensified, dissent within the Senate and military ranks continued to grow. Many prominent figures expressed their outrage at the cruelty of Nero's actions, seeing the treatment of Christians as emblematic of a broader moral decline in Rome under his rule. This mounting dissent began to coalesce around figures like Galba, who represented a viable alternative to Nero's despotic regime. The general's growing popularity and military support posed a direct threat to the emperor, as loyalty within the legions began to waver in light of Nero's tyrannical actions. Nero's reign, once characterized by promise, now descended into chaos and brutality, with paranoia driving him further into isolation. He continued to engage in lavish artistic performances, believing that they would somehow restore his public image and distract from the realities of his governance. However, the disconnect between his actions and the sentiments of the Roman people only deepened the chasm of mistrust between him and the populace. As reports of revolts grew, and as conspiracies against him festered, Nero's grip on power weakened, leading to a climate of instability that would prove untenable. The stage was set for a clash of power, as the Senate and the military grew restless under Nero's rule. As dissatisfaction swelled, the whispers of revolution transformed into outright rebellion, culminating in a series of uprisings against the emperor. These developments set the groundwork for what would become a dramatic confrontation between Nero and his adversaries, leading to the eventual crumbling of his empire. The persecution of Christians, while a strategy of political maneuvering for Nero, backfired in unforeseen ways, as it galvanized a community that would eventually outlast his rule. This chapter of Nero's reign illustrated the dangers of tyranny and scapegoating, setting the scene for the tumultuous events that would ultimately lead to his downfall. Part 9. The Revolt of Vex, Sparks of Rebellion. In 68 CE, the situation for Nero reached a boiling point when Gaius Julius Vindex, the governor of Gallia Lugdunensis, sparked a revolt against the emperor. Vindex was driven by a mix of personal ambition and a genuine desire to end Nero's tyrannical rule, believing he could restore the dignity and stability of the Roman Empire. His rebellion began as a localized uprising but quickly gained momentum as more provincial leaders rallied to his cause, seeing an opportunity to challenge Nero's authority. Vindex's revolt was not merely a reaction to Nero's tyranny. It tapped into the growing discontent among the military and the provinces, where soldiers had grown increasingly dissatisfied with their emperor's neglect and extravagance. The promise of a return to a more traditional form of governance resonated with many, as they longed for stability and respectability in leadership. As Vindex's forces gathered, the prospect of dethroning Nero ignited hope among those weary of his excesses and brutality. The revolt put pressure on Nero, who found himself increasingly isolated as military leaders in Gaul began to defect to Vindex's side. The emperor's response to the uprising was marked by panic and desperation. Rather than seeking a peaceful resolution, he chose to mobilize loyal troops to quell the rebellion, demonstrating a level of instability that further alienated him from potential allies. His inability to effectively address the crisis illustrated his profound disconnect from the realities facing his regime, as he remained ensnared in the trappings of self-indulgence while the empire unraveled around him. As Vindex's rebellion gained traction, Nero's position grew more precarious. The Senate, which had been waiting for a reason to act against the emperor, saw this as a pivotal moment. Many senators, who had long criticized Nero's actions, began to openly conspire against him, believing that the tide was turning in favor of those who opposed his reign. The possibility of Vindex succeeding in his rebellion provided a rallying point for those within the Senate who wished to see Nero removed from power. The loyalty of the Praetorian Guard, once a bedrock of support for Nero, also began to waver. Facing increasing dissent within the ranks, many soldiers grew restless and sympathetic to the plight of the provinces, where the effects of Nero's misrule had been most acutely felt. Reports of Vindex's successes against Nero's forces began to circulate, stoking further discontent among the troops, and leading to growing reluctance to fight for an emperor they viewed as increasingly unworthy. Faced with the dual threats of rebellion and disloyalty, Nero found himself backed into a corner. His former supporters began to withdraw their backing, and the atmosphere of fear that had characterized his rule began to shift toward outright defiance. As Vindex gained ground, Nero's paranoia deepened, and he began to view the world around him with an increasingly skewed perspective. His isolation from reality, once merely a nuisance, became a grave danger to his continued reign. Realizing the situation was dire, Nero attempted to assert his authority through grandiose declarations, hoping to rally support and restore his image. He proclaimed himself a champion of the empire and vowed to quell the rebellion through sheer force, but the more he proclaimed his resolve, the more evident it became that he was losing control. The loyalty of the military was slipping through his fingers, and the support of the Senate was waning as whispers of discontent turned into open rebellion. The Revolt of Vex was a crucial moment that foreshadowed the eventual downfall of Nero. It represented not only a military challenge but also a moral indictment of his rule, exposing the growing fractures within Roman society and governance. The rising tide of rebellion symbolized a broader yearning for change among the people of Rome and the provinces, a desire for leadership that prioritized the welfare of the empire over self-indulgence and excess. This moment served as a catalyst for the dramatic events that would soon unfold, leading Nero further down the path toward his inevitable demise. Part 10: Galbas Ascendency, the death knell for Nero. As the revolt led by Vex gained momentum, the atmosphere in Rome grew increasingly chaotic. Vex's forces clashed with Nero's loyal troops, resulting in significant losses for the emperor. In the midst of this turmoil, another key figure emerged: Servius Sulpicius Galba, the governor of Hispania Tarraconensis. A respected general and former supporter of Nero, Galba saw an opportunity to seize power amid the growing unrest, positioning himself as a viable alternative to the embattled emperor. Galba's rebellion quickly garnered support from disillusioned military leaders and senators alike. His reputation for integrity and experience stood in stark contrast to Nero's extravagance and tyranny. As news of Vex's revolt spread, many Roman citizens and military leaders began to flock to Galba's banner, viewing him as a stabilizing force who could restore dignity to the empire. The tide was turning against Nero, and the sentiment within the Senate and military shifted toward favoring Galba as the man who could bring an end to the chaos and excess of the current regime. Nero, aware of the threats closing in on him, attempted to rally his loyal supporters, but his efforts fell flat in the face of overwhelming opposition. Panic began to seep into the corridors of power as he struggled to maintain control over the Praetorian Guard, which had begun to waver in their allegiance. Discontent spread among the ranks, and the military, once a loyal bastion of support for the emperor, now teetered on the edge of rebellion, torn between their loyalty to Nero and the growing appeal of Galba. As Galba's forces advanced toward Rome, Nero's isolation deepened. He found himself cut off from crucial alliances and left with few loyal supporters in a rapidly disintegrating political landscape. With Vex's rebellion at the forefront and Galba's ascendance looming, Nero's position as emperor became increasingly untenable. In a desperate attempt to cling to power, he dispatched emissaries to Galba, seeking negotiations, but the messages were received with disdain and outright refusal, as Galba's supporters had no intention of compromising with a ruler they viewed as a tyrant. Faced with mounting pressure and realizing that his reign was coming to an end, Nero began to retreat into paranoia and despair. His once grand ambitions devolved into frantic measures to preserve his life and status, as he contemplated fleeing the city that had become a symbol of his downfall. As the walls closed in around him, his extravagant lifestyle gave way to frantic attempts at self-preservation, reflecting the profound disconnect between his perception of himself and the grim reality he faced. In June of 68 CE, the moment of reckoning arrived as Galba's forces closed in on Rome. Realizing that his reign was over, Nero decided to take matters into his own hands. He fled the city, seeking refuge in the countryside, but soon found himself hunted by those who had once been his allies. As he wandered, he experienced the bitterness of betrayal and the stark reality of his situation, reflecting on the choices that had led him to this moment. Ultimately, Nero took his own life on June 9, 68 CE, marking a dramatic and tragic end to a tumultuous reign that had begun with promise but descended into chaos and tyranny. As he faced the prospect of capture and humiliation, he chose death over the ignominy of being paraded through the streets of Rome as a defeated ruler. His final words, according to historical accounts, expressed a sense of despair over the loss of power, reflecting his troubled psyche and the weight of his legacy. With Nero's death, the Julio-Claudian dynasty came to an abrupt end, leading to a power vacuum that would plunge Rome into a year of civil war and chaos known as the Year of the Four Emperors. The consequences of his reign, characterized by excess and tyranny, reverberated throughout the empire, reshaping the course of Roman history for generations to come. Nero's fall symbolized not only the end of an era, but also served as a cautionary tale of the dangers of unchecked power and the volatility of absolute rule. His life and reign stand as a testament to the complexities of leadership and the intricate interplay between personal ambition and the greater good of society. Part 11. The Aftermath of Nero's Death, a Power Vacuum and Chaos. The death of Nero in 68 CE sent shockwaves through Rome and the vast expanse of the Roman Empire. The sudden removal of a ruler who had been both a controversial and polarizing figure left a significant power vacuum, igniting a struggle for control that would plunge the empire into turmoil. What followed would come to be known as the Year of the Four Emperors, a period marked by rapid succession and violent conflict as various factions vied for supremacy over Rome. Immediately following Nero's demise, Galba, who had led the revolt against him, seized the opportunity to declare himself emperor. He entered Rome triumphantly, welcomed by a populace eager for change after years of tyranny and excess under Nero. However, Galba's rule proved to be short-lived and tumultuous, as he faced immediate challenges from rival claimants and discontent among the military and the populace. His attempts to restore order and reinstate traditional senatorial authority alienated many who had supported him, leading to widespread dissatisfaction. Galba's leadership style was far from the benevolent ruler many had hoped for. His strict measures, including refusal to pay the Praetorian Guard their promised donative, bred resentment among the very forces that had helped him seize power. The tension escalated into a crisis when, just a few months into his reign, the Praetorian Guard turned against him, leading to his assassination in January 69 CE. His death marked the beginning of a chaotic succession struggle that would see multiple claimants to the throne emerge in rapid succession. Following Galba's assassination, Otho, a former supporter of Nero, seized the opportunity to claim the title of emperor. Initially, Otho found favor among the military, securing their loyalty and promising reforms to address the discontent that had characterized Galba's short rule. However, his reign was marred by conflict as Vitellius, another general and contender for the throne, began to rally his own support among the legions. The ensuing conflict between Otho and Vitellius erupted into civil war, with both sides vying for control of Rome and its resources. The situation quickly spiraled into chaos as allegiances shifted and violence erupted throughout the city. Otho's reign lasted only a few months before he faced defeat at the hands of Vitellius's forces at the Battle of Bedriacum. Following this defeat, Otho chose to take his own life rather than face the humiliation of capture, further contributing to the instability that gripped the empire. Vitellius ascended to power next, yet his reign was equally short-lived and characterized by excess and brutality. His rule quickly alienated many of his supporters, as he indulged in lavish feasts and paraded his power in a manner reminiscent of Nero's excesses. This further fueled the growing unrest among the legions and the Senate, which had begun to conspire against him as well. The perception that Rome was spiraling into madness under incompetent rulers led to increased calls for change, and dissent simmered beneath the surface. By the end of 69 CE, Vespasian, a general who had been campaigning in Judea, emerged as a formidable contender for the throne. His military reputation and promises of stability resonated with the disillusioned populace and soldiers alike. Vespasian's forces advanced on Rome, culminating in a final confrontation with Vitellius's supporters, leading to the latter's downfall and execution. With Vitellius's death, Vespasian finally secured control of the empire, bringing an end to the chaos that had characterized the previous year. The tumultuous events following Nero's death illustrate the dangers of political instability and the fragility of power within the Roman Empire. The civil war that ensued highlighted the deep divisions within Roman society, with rival factions fighting not just for power, but for the very soul of the empire. The legacy of Nero, marked by tyranny and excess, lingered in the minds of Romans as they sought to rebuild in the aftermath of chaos. As Vespasian established the Flavian dynasty, he faced the immense task of restoring order and stability to a fractured empire, learning from the lessons of Nero's reign to forge a new path forward. The power vacuum left in Nero's wake not only reshaped the political landscape of Rome, but also forced the empire to confront the consequences of tyranny and the need for responsible leadership. Part 12. The Legacy of Nero, an Emperor Remembered. Nero's reign, despite its many excesses and brutalities, left an indelible mark on Roman history, shaping the perception of imperial power for generations to come. His legacy is a complex tapestry woven from the threads of art, culture, tyranny, and the eventual decline of a dynasty. The aftermath of his rule ushered in a critical examination of leadership within the Roman Empire, prompting reflections on the nature of power and the responsibilities it entails. While Nero is often vilified in historical accounts, it is essential to recognize that his reign also witnessed significant cultural developments, particularly in the arts. He was an enthusiastic patron of music, theater, and literature, believing that art could elevate the status of the empire and promote his image as a cultured and enlightened ruler. His performances as an artist, though often seen as self-indulgent, reflected a genuine belief in the transformative power of art, a notion that resonated with some segments of Roman society. Moreover, Nero's ambitious building projects, including the Grand Domus Aurea, were attempts to reshape Rome's urban landscape and express the grandeur of the empire. While these efforts were tainted by the chaos surrounding his reign, they contributed to Rome's architectural legacy, influencing future emperors and shaping the city's development long after his death. The opulence of his constructions, even in the face of his many failings, marked a turning point in Roman architecture, blending Greco-Roman styles with innovative designs that would leave an enduring impact. However, the darker aspects of Nero's legacy cannot be overlooked. The persecution of Christians during his reign set a precedent for future persecutions, illustrating the precarious position of minority groups in the face of political instability and scapegoating. His willingness to resort to violence to maintain power exemplified the potential for tyranny that can arise when leaders prioritize their desires over the needs of their people. The consequences of his rule served as a cautionary tale for subsequent emperors, reinforcing the necessity of balance between authority and benevolence. The chaotic aftermath of his death, characterized by the Year of the Four Emperors, underscored the fragility of power and the ease with which it can be lost when leaders fail to connect with their subjects and the elite. The rapid succession of rulers following Nero's demise illustrated the challenges of governance in an empire that had become increasingly fragmented and polarized. Nero's story also highlights the role of historical narrative in shaping perceptions of leadership. The portrayal of Nero in the annals of history was influenced by those who wrote about him, often colored by their own biases and the political climate of their time. Subsequent historians grappled with the complexities of his character, attempting to reconcile his artistic ambitions with his tyrannical actions. The dichotomy between the artist and the tyrant remains a central theme in discussions of Nero's legacy, prompting debates about the nature of power and the responsibilities of rulers. Ultimately, Nero's legacy serves as a mirror reflecting the complexities of human ambition and governance. It raises questions about the costs of leadership, the role of art and culture in society, and the moral obligations of those in power. His life and reign remind us that history is often written by those in power, but it is the echoes of the past that continue to shape the future. As the empire moved forward under the Flavian dynasty, the lessons of Nero's rule lingered in the collective consciousness of Rome, urging future leaders to learn from the past and strive for a balance between power and responsibility. The legacy of Nero is one of contrasts, revealing the multifaceted nature of leadership and the lasting impact of individual rulers on the course of history. Part 13: Nero in Popular Culture, a Lasting Infamy. The narrative of Nero's life and reign transcends the historical texts, permeating popular culture and shaping the perception of tyrants throughout the centuries. His infamous reputation has inspired a wealth of artistic interpretations, literature, and media, reflecting the enduring fascination with his character and actions. From Shakespeare's tragedies to modern films, the story of Nero continues to captivate audiences, illustrating how history can be reinterpreted and reimagined across different eras. One of the earliest portrayals of Nero can be found in the works of Roman historians such as Tacitus and Suetonius, whose accounts provided detailed insights into his character and reign. These accounts established a foundation upon which later interpretations would build, solidifying Nero's image as a tyrant whose excesses and cruelty defined his rule. Their vivid descriptions of his performances, scandals, and acts of persecution served to cement his infamy in the annals of history, ensuring that he would be remembered as one of Rome's most controversial emperors. In the Renaissance, the fascination with Nero took on new dimensions as artists sought to explore the darker aspects of human nature through their work. Shakespeare's depiction of Nero in his play, The Tragedy of Julius Caesar, highlights the emperor's moral decay and ambition, reflecting the era's preoccupation with themes of power and betrayal. This portrayal contributed to the understanding of Nero as not just a ruler but a symbol of unchecked ambition and moral corruption. Throughout the centuries, writers and playwrights have continued to explore Nero's character, often using his story as a cautionary tale about the perils of power and the consequences of tyranny. His legacy became a touchstone for discussions surrounding leadership, ethics, and the human condition, prompting audiences to reflect on the complexities of governance and ambition. The concept of the Neronian became shorthand for excessive cruelty and extravagance, influencing how subsequent tyrants have been perceived in both fiction and historical narratives. In modern times, Nero's story has been adapted into films and television series, often portraying him as a larger-than-life figure embodying both charisma and malevolence. These adaptations reflect contemporary anxieties about authority and leadership, drawing parallels between Nero's reign and the political landscapes of today. The enduring interest in Nero serves as a reminder of the power of storytelling and its role in shaping our understanding of history, as artists and creators reinterpret the past to resonate with present-day audiences. Furthermore, the narrative of Nero has influenced political discourse, as leaders throughout history have been compared to him in discussions about tyranny and excess. The specter of Nero looms large in the collective consciousness, providing a lens through which we examine the dynamics of power and the responsibilities that come with it. His legacy serves as a cautionary tale, warning against the dangers of authoritarianism and the moral compromises that can arise from unchecked ambition. As society continues to grapple with issues of leadership, governance, and morality, Nero's story endures as a potent symbol of the complexities of power and its consequences. The ongoing fascination with his life reflects a broader human desire to understand the nature of authority and the delicate balance between ambition and ethical responsibility. In this way, Nero's legacy transcends time and continues to shape cultural narratives, reminding us that the lessons of history are often echoed in the stories we tell and the figures we create. The impact of Nero on popular culture illustrates the lasting power of historical figures to inform contemporary discussions about morality, leadership, and the human experience. Part 14. Lessons from Nero: The Enduring Relevance of History. The saga of Nero, Rome's fourth emperor, is rich with lessons that resonate far beyond the confines of ancient history. His reign serves as a multifaceted case study in the dynamics of power, the consequences of tyranny, and the interplay between art and politics. As modern society navigates complex political landscapes, the story of Nero offers valuable insights into the nature of leadership and the responsibilities it entails. One of the most salient lessons from Nero's life is the importance of connection between leaders and their subjects. Nero's descent into tyranny was marked by a growing disconnect from the needs and desires of the Roman populace. His prioritization of personal pleasure over civic responsibility ultimately alienated many, leading to widespread discontent and rebellion. This serves as a poignant reminder that leaders must remain attuned to the sentiments of their constituents, for a failure to do so can precipitate unrest and upheaval. Additionally, Nero's story underscores the perils of unchecked ambition and the ethical dilemmas faced by those in power. His relentless pursuit of personal glory led him down a path of cruelty and excess, illustrating how the desire for greatness can corrupt even the most promising leaders. The moral compromises he made in the pursuit of power resonate with contemporary discussions surrounding the ethics of leadership and the sacrifices some are willing to make for personal gain. This prompts reflection on the balance between ambition and integrity, urging current and future leaders to consider the consequences of their actions on society as a whole. Nero's legacy also highlights the role of history and storytelling in shaping perceptions of leadership. His life, often framed as a cautionary tale, serves as a powerful narrative about the complexities of power and the dangers of tyranny. The interpretations of his reign remind us of the importance of critical historical analysis and the need to question dominant narratives, recognizing that history is often written by those in power. This calls for a nuanced understanding of the past, where the stories we tell can either uphold or challenge prevailing ideologies and attitudes toward authority. Moreover, the political chaos that followed Nero's death emphasizes the fragility of power and the rapid shifts that can occur within political systems. The Year of the Four Emperors serves as a reminder of the potential consequences of leadership failures and the need for stable governance to ensure societal cohesion. In our contemporary world, where political landscapes can change abruptly, the importance of stable, accountable leadership becomes increasingly relevant. Finally, the enduring fascination with Nero in popular culture illustrates the timeless nature of his story and its implications for understanding human behavior. The myriad adaptations of his life reflect society's ongoing grappling with themes of power, morality, and the consequences of excess. This engagement with Nero's narrative encourages critical reflection on contemporary leaders and their legacies, urging a continuous examination of the responsibilities that accompany authority. In conclusion, the lessons gleaned from Nero's tumultuous reign are as pertinent today as they were in ancient Rome. As we reflect on the complexities of leadership, the ethical dimensions of power, and the consequences of ambition, Nero's story remains a vital part of the historical dialogue that informs our understanding of governance and the human experience. By studying figures like Nero, society can better navigate the challenges of leadership and strive for a more ethical and responsible approach to power. Part 15. A final reflection on Nero's impact. As we conclude this exploration of Nero, Rome's fourth emperor, it becomes evident that his reign was not merely a tale of tyranny and excess, but a complex narrative that speaks to the very heart of leadership and human nature. The ramifications of his actions resonate through history, offering profound insights into the dynamics of power, the fragility of authority, and the consequences of ambition. Nero's life, characterized by contradictions, continues to prompt reflection on the nature of governance and the ethical responsibilities of those who wield power. From his initial rise as a young and promising leader to his descent into tyranny, Nero's story is a reminder of the precariousness of power. The allure of authority can lead even the most capable individuals down a path of corruption and moral decay, demonstrating the importance of self-awareness and humility in leadership. His inability to connect with his people ultimately led to widespread dissatisfaction, rebellion, and his eventual downfall. This serves as a timeless lesson for contemporary leaders about the necessity of empathy and responsiveness in governance. Moreover, the cultural legacy of Nero, reflected in art, literature, and popular media, illustrates the enduring power of storytelling in shaping historical narratives. The fascination with his character, both as an artist and a tyrant, underscores the complexities of human nature and the multifaceted aspects of leadership. By examining how Nero has been portrayed over the centuries, we gain insight into societal attitudes toward authority and the values that inform our perceptions of leaders. In a world where political instability and the challenges of leadership remain relevant, the lessons from Nero's reign can guide modern discourse on governance. The narrative surrounding his life emphasizes the importance of accountability, ethical conduct, and the potential consequences of ambition when left unchecked. As society continues to grapple with the complexities of authority, it is essential to draw from historical examples, using them as frameworks to navigate contemporary challenges. Nero's reign also illustrates the necessity of a healthy political discourse where diverse voices are heard and valued. The chaotic aftermath of his rule highlights the importance of stability, collective decision-making, and the dangers posed by authoritarianism. As we engage with the lessons of history, we are reminded that the legacies of leaders, good and bad, continue to shape the societies we inhabit today. In reflection, Nero's impact extends beyond his tumultuous reign, serving as a powerful lens through which we can explore the intricacies of leadership, the ethical dilemmas of power, and the human condition. By understanding the past, we equip ourselves to create a better future, informed by the lessons of history and the responsibilities that come with authority. Thus, Nero's legacy remains a vital part of our ongoing exploration of governance, ethics, and the complexities of human ambition. Thanks for tuning in to Historical Legacies. If you enjoyed this dive into history, please like, subscribe, and share. Join us next time for more fascinating stories from the past.